Hey folks, this is Chris Johnson at Living Waters Fly Fishing with another online fly tying video. Today is actually pretty cool. We're actually doing a brand new pattern that Umpqua Feather Merchants just picked up. It's one of my signature patterns called the Mimic Mouse. And this fly is absolutely phenomenal. I've been using it for, gosh, I guess it's been 2 years now since I tied the original prototypes. We fished it in Colorado this past summer. It did exceptionally well. Have fished it throughout the hill country. And it's really kind of designed to be a creek mouse pattern. So something that, you know, I like throwing a mouse, but a lot of times mice are just too big or they're real gaudy and they have, you know, majorly large hook gaps and stuff like that for obviously larger predatory fish. This fly, I wanted to make sure that it was a little bit more bite-sized. The version that Umpqua is going to pick up is going to be tied on a, it's basically a size 6 201R. But, and I can show you the hook here real quick. This is the hook here, that 201R. We're going to tie it on a size 6, but keep in mind the originals were tied on size 8s. This is a 2x long hook that equals that shank length. So even though this is a size 6, it's shorter than the longer version of the 8. So to get started, I got a 201R and a size 6 in there. We're going to be tying with an 8/0 Veevus tan thread. So we're going to go ahead and get started there. Just add your thread on the hook, nothing major here. We're going to go and tie that on. And what we're going to do here first is we want to add a micro pine squirrel zonker tail. So one of these little guys right here. So pine squirrel zonker in a micro brown. I can actually do this. I trim these. You can do them freehand if you want to, but I can also show you a really neat way to trim these as well. I'm going to lose the hook real quick and I'll show you a little trick here for those of you that want to do this at home and not do it freehand. Take the butt end of that zonker, clip it in your vise, pull this little end. I want there to be a little bit of a fuzzy bit on the end that kind of paddles around as the mouse swims. Take a long set of scissors and trim that up nice and close. And that right there gets you exactly what you want. And we'll throw that hook back in there now that I've showed you that little trick. Thanks to Dynaking for making this easy. Get the thread back where we want it. And all we're going to do is take that tail, and I'm going to do, it's probably going to be a shank and a half, somewhere in there for total length. Something about like that on there. And that should be fine. The tie-in point, what I want to do is go and tie this in really firmly. Make sure I have enough tail back there to move around, but not so much that it's going to foul all the time. The secret on this to keep it from fouling, while holding this thread tight, let's go ahead and move, or holding the tail tight rather, I'm going to tie this down into the bend ever so slightly. That doesn't allow this tail to really wrap back through the gape of the hook very much at all. Once we have that much thread on, our work here is done. So that's all we need. Tie that down nice, neat, and firmly, and that is all we want. So that gives us our micro pine squirrel zonker tail in brown. Very next step is going to be adding a foam back, and I'm using a laminated foam strip. This is, I think it's 2mm by 1mm if I remember correctly. These here are, let me see if I can get the package and not throw it in my lap. This right here, it's a 3mm thick foam little gurgler strips from Sight Cast Fishing, and I love these. And so these are, you can use any kind of foam you have. If you just want to use a single color, that's fine. I just think the 2-color really does give it a nice effect. Take yourself a long set of scissors, something that's got a really, really long set, and do this here. I'm going to basically have a cut point, and I can kind of show you there roughly. We're cutting it at an angle, and I want to just shave off that outer edge. And notice I'm not closing the scissors entirely at all. And this thing grows in width ever so slightly. And you can, if you had a form or something, yeah, absolutely, you could come through there and do these with a punch. For me, I just do all this freehand, and it's not that big of a deal. I'm tying it with the tan side down and the brown side up. So I'm just gonna tie that down real quick. I'm gonna hold the foam under a little bit of tension to make it a little easier to kind of jump over with my thread. And I'm gonna jump over that a couple of times here. And we're going to check, make sure that it meets up with the tail. I got just a little bit more to go here. I want that to mesh up with the tail almost perfectly. Get that right over it, and I'm just going to kind of bunch that as much as I can into the tail. Now we've got it where it's seamless, where the tail touches the back of the foam. That's what we're after right there. And I want that foam back to be pretty solid. So I'm going to tie that down, make sure that we don't have too much diameter there. And then the funniest part of this whole fly is what makes it so unique is I was really looking for a mouse pattern that would float high, but I also wanted a fly that it moves like crazy. So mice, if you've ever fished mouse patterns, you are probably aware that they don't always land upright. And that's something that annoys me immensely, because when you're trying to strip a mouse fly in and get it to kind of skitter and swim across the surface, a lot of times they'll roll or pitch over. This one does not do that. For one, thanks to the diameter of the hook, when you go to a size 6 on these things, they do get pretty thick, so the hook diameter is actually pretty solid. In addition to that, what we're going to do is, since that hook point is low, we're going to look at how high that foam's going to sit up there. It keels over really nice. There's also a little trick at the end of the fly. But the entire body, the whole underbody of this fly is made out of soft hackle. And this right here is a whiting Hebert minor hen saddle in wild type. So this wild type hackle is just that perfect modeling, great downy feathers. So you'll see, like, if you pull a single feather, you get this really good mottled brown that we're looking for, along with this kind of a mousy gray downy. And we're going to use the whole stinking feather for this. What we're going to do is tie it in by the tip. And I'm not going to use the smallest of small here. If you'll notice, I'm going to actually migrate a little bit further down the feather itself. Tie that in, just give a couple securing wraps. Come with your scissors, trim that point off. Any of those little strays you can get out of there too. And just tie that down nice and firm. Don't worry about being too nice and neat here. I mean, you can if you're like a perfectionist, but sadly I'm not. I wish I was. It would be a lot. I'd probably enjoy my fly tying even more, but I wouldn't get as many flies tied. So here, all we're going to do is clamp that in a hackle plier and simply take that with these hackle pliers, making wraps, moving this forward as we go. So just jumping over them, kind of fluff those and stroke them rearward. Again, fluffing it, stroking it rearward, and same story. Just like that. And we're going to start to run out of feather right about here, which is okay by me. So right there, you can see we ran out of downy feather. Come over this with the bobbin, make a couple of securing wraps, trim this, take this and tie this down nice and firm. We want that going nowhere. I'm going to slick this back. My first one, I'm a little bit more particular about this because this is really what makes up that rear portion of the fly. When we fold this over in a minute, you'll notice this is going to make that mouse body that we're really after. That's what I really want to see here, is just that really great mouse body all the way through. So we're just trying to make sure, let me back this off, I can get you all a little bit more of a rotary shot here. That right there is exactly what I'm after, where we have that nice splayed out hackle on either side. And we're simply going to repeat that process a number of times. The longer these feathers, I've got a couple pre-selected here, the longer they are, the easier this process is. Just simply because you have a lot more feather to work with. I'm going to go back on the feather ever so slightly, tie that in with a few securing wraps, come in here with your scissors, trim that off, make a few wraps forward, grab it with your hackle plier, and we are off to the races. So same story, make the wraps, try not to twist the feather. It's going to want to pivot a little bit, that's okay. Just kind of fluff that out. And if you migrate your wrap a little bit further forward, it's okay, because we're going to tie back on it anyway. And you'll notice right where that foam's tied in, right here where I get to the downy, that's totally fine. It's going to step off just fine. I'm not going to have any worries about that at all. So here I'm just going to use up the rest of this feather. And as soon as you get to like the thick section of the quill, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and tie this down, just like so. Make those securing wraps, trim that off, and then once you've done so, pull this tight, slick this back, and then wrap back on it just a little bit. These first couple, I really want those jammed in there nice and neat. Keeping in mind that when we do this, the final step, and actually pull this foam back over, you'll see that it's going to splay all these feathers out to the side. That's what we're after. So we're just going to repeat that process several times. I've done this a couple feathers at a time. I've done it one at a time. Both work fine, so whatever your time commitment is on these is fine. I like doing them singles just so I can really control the wraps a little bit more. It doesn't really take that long to do. This here, most mouse flies that you're going to see are going to be deer hair or all foam. Some of them you'll see have like a spun, underbody out of rabbit or like wrapped zonker, anything like that. You will see a lot of different materials. I wanted something that just moved like mad, even at rest, and didn't have a zonker skin to really weigh it down. So that really helps with these guys. Make sure you fluff your feathers out all nice and neat. And we are getting close. We probably have 2 more feathers to go, and I think that's about how many I've got on the bench. Right here, pull this, and we are going to stop ever so slightly short of the eye. Once you have those securing wraps, trim that, pull this tight, get that little phyllo plume out of there. wrap back on this ever so slightly just to mash it back into the other. And you can start to see that mouse body really starting to form here. Again, if we were to divide this up a little bit and kind of splay it out to the sides like we're going to do in the final, you'll see that body's really starting to form up nice and neat. So 2 more feathers to go, and then we are off to the races for the rest of it where we do the foam. And after that, there's 1 more step and it's all over. Pretty straightforward mouse fly to tie. For those of you that do not like working with deer hair, this is such an easy pattern. It's just got a lot of repetitive steps. So while it is not the fastest tie in the world, it is in many ways easier than working with deer hair for folks. And it's materials that you probably have access to pretty readily. Getting any sort of soft hackle, they're not expensive. This is not a very expensive fly to tie. And these soft hackles just work wonders and move like mad in the water. Had a client with me in Colorado this past year that we were fishing this fly on some still water, and he went double digits in a morning just fishing this single mouse fly. And we've never had a mouse pattern that did that. And it was just amazing to watch how they ate it, just every trout ate it just unquestioningly. I had to make a couple of modifications to it the other day. When Umpqua picked it up, they wanted to change the hook to a different hook, so that's where we landed on the 201, which I actually like better than my original anyway. But when I swam it in Brushy Creek the other day, I was just having fun swimming my new fly in 50-degree weather where our fish down here really aren't thinking about mice. And I had fish trying to eat this fly in 50-degree weather. It was hilarious. So I do know that it works in warm water and cold water with ease, so you're not going to have any problems there. And the final feather before we finish our steps, I'm going to take this one. This is a little smaller in diameter. You can control the mouse's body width by the diameter of feather. Ideally, before I kind of move on with this step, ideally kind of grab from the middle of the pelt. Don't do up here where these are going to be more, this section here is going to be a lot more for nymphs and smaller stuff like that. The mid section here is where I'm grabbing from. If you decide to tie this fly any larger, use the stuff on the back side where you have these really big, wide, webby feathers. That's really where you'll get your different sizes throughout the entire thing. So here we're just kind of grabbing from the middle since we're tying a size 6. And that's it there. We're going to make a couple of wraps. We may or may not use all of this feather. Let me see kind of how it falls. Stroke everything rearwards. We're just covering up our thread wraps. I'm probably going to stop just short of the eye. So right about there. That should be perfect. That's the final wrap. Keeping in mind we are going to tie this off and bring the foam over. So right there at that point, come in here and trim that as close as we can get it without cutting threads and such. Stroke everything rearward. Got a couple of strays there. Give us a nice little thread base. And that's good. That's all we need right there. So now what we have is this perfect little mouse body. And what I'm going to do before we pull the foam over is I want to take all of this and splay all of this material out to the sides. And I think you can see a little bit wider feathers in the back, narrower feathers in the front. Really, really helps kind of make that tapered mouse body. We're going to simply come here, fluff all this out. I'm going to push that down. Once I've done so, come over this, and I want to try to do this a little bit further back. Right about there is exactly what I want. Couple of wraps. This is 8/0 thread, so it's pretty strong. You don't want to pull, if you did this with gel spun, the likelihood of you cutting through the thread is pretty high, so we don't want to do that. But now you can see we've got this mouse body, flared to the sides, really, really good looking underbody on the fly. And this is where I think the rubber really meets the road here, and that is we're going to take this, fold it back over itself just like so. So all we did is kind of pull this backwards, bend it over itself, making kind of that gurgler head, so to speak. And we are going to draw that down into the exact same tie-in point. And it's going to be pretty firm. So make sure you've got plenty of wraps in there. If you want to put one in front and then go back over, I don't know if y'all saw what I did there, but basically I pulled this back, went up here in front of that and back over. If you want to do that, that's totally fine. That just helps you maintain thread tension throughout. But plenty of wraps there to make sure that that's nice and firm and tight. We're not moving anywhere. Final step here is I'm going to actually trim this right there. It's about just past the halfway point on the back. What this does is that gives us a little bit more flotation up top, And just for a little bit of a finished look, I normally trim the corners off that tab on the top. That way it's just a little bit more rounded and just looks a little bit more polished and finished, and that's really what I'm after. So we got this nice fuzzy mouse body underneath that's gonna move just exceptionally well in the water. And then the final step, and for those of you that know me, you know that it's really hard for me to tie a fly that doesn't have CDC in it. And so this being that it is a mouse fly and it's part of the Mimic series, so the Mimic mouse, I'm gonna take 2 CDC feathers. I've flared these where I've taken them by the tips and pulled them this way. So taking those, once you've flared them, take them, and I'm gonna use this in a Mark Pettyjohn magic tool. And so this little magic tool, all I'm gonna do is put the bigger feather on top, smaller feather on bottom, push them down into that clip, and if you'll notice, they're going to fold up just like that. That's exactly what I'm looking for. What we're gonna do here is once we have this in the clip, we're going to, or into the base rather, I'm gonna take the actual chip clip portion of this, slip it over the CDC just like so, and now at that point you can actually hold it just like this, where I mean it's secure. If it's in this top clip, you're good. You can release it from the base, and what that does is now our CDC is folded together and kind of more or less a CDC taco, and who doesn't love tacos? So right here, we're gonna come in here and trim all those quills away, where now all we are left with is usable CDC to spin in a brush with our thread. The part we're gonna do here, we're gonna pull this down, give ourselves a little bit more thread. I'm going to split the thread with a very sharp needle, and that is a little bit easier said than done. If you're trying to do this with a standard bodkin, then you are going to fail miserably if it does not have an exceptionally sharp point. The Mark Pettyjohn thread splitting needles are great. There's also several other bodkins out there that do kind of use a sewing needle or something of that sort that is going to be very, very sharp. Here all we want to do is take that clip, insert it in the loop. We're going to pull it out lightly and open this up. Now all that's inserted, I'm gonna spin my bobbin just like this, let it spin away. I want all those twists, and then I'm gonna take my fingers and move those twists up into that CDC brush just like that. And that's it. Once I've done so, I'm gonna make sure that we are in position, everything looks good, stroke everything back to where I'm not pushing my hackle down. I'm gonna do a few wraps, I'm gonna stroke those back, and if you'll notice, I get this nice, fluffy, high floating CDC collar, and that's what I'm after. The real trick here, in order to keep your hook eye clean, pull everything back, give a few wraps there. We throw a whip finish on this, and it is done. So come in here, make your little whip finish. I'm gonna try to pull all my CDC back to where I'm not capturing that. That's it, a little drop of head cement, and you are golden. So give that a nice little pull there, tighten it up, give a snip. Our work here is done. This is a finished Mimic mouse. You've got this beautiful tawny, kind of mottled underbelly. Let me tighten this up just a smidge so it stays in one place here. But you can see right here, all of this is just beautiful. And that one little feather that's kind of poking up there, that's not a problem. It just didn't get inside the hook gap, so we're good. I'll stroke him out. But that's what the underside looks like. The CDC kind of functions as just more motion and a really good transition on the underside of the fly to really make this thing swim well, be very realistic in the water, and everything on it floats with the exception of you know, the CDC floats, the foam floats, the hackle is going to get waterlogged, which helps the fly right, and the squirrel is just going to sit there and paddle exactly like you want. But the heavy flotation in the CDC and the foam is what makes this fly work. When it swims, since the back of the fly has more of that hackle and less foam, it's going to actually drop tail a little bit in the water and kind of try to struggle to get out. That's the thing that I think makes this thing look so good in the water. Incredible fly, very effective, and happy to have this one on board with Umpqua. Y'all can tie a few for yourself, or maybe here pretty soon get to buy a few. Thank y'all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.